My name is Philip Van Cleve. I'm the president of the Virginia Citizens Defense League. This is our annual lobby day. We have a series of speakers. We also have a bunch of people still lobbying in the building that unfortunately some of them couldn't get appointments with delegates and senators outside of the rally time. I'm going to start with Delegate Zare. Delegate Zare is a freshman, came out swinging on protecting our rights to keep and bear arms. Had already put in some good gun bills last year, put in a bill for VCDL this year, and we're going to let him talk to the crowd because he's got to get back inside and get back to legislating. Delegate Zare.
Thank you, Mr. Van Cleve. And as Phil said, this is my second year in Richmond, and I am still trying to wrap my mind around the thought process that goes on here that says that guns somehow hurt people. We know that guns save lives. Our founding fathers knew also that guns save lives. The founding fathers who gave us checks and balances in the legislature and in the executive gave us a balance when they gave us the Second Amendment, because they knew that men do not handle power well. You give men power, they typically want to consolidate that power, they typically want to expand that power, and the only way they knew that you and I would not go through the tyranny that they went through is if we had the Second Amendment. They had lived through the tyranny of King George. They had experienced it firsthand. You can remember some of the stories of George Washington thinking he was done. But he fought, and they kept on, and they made the ultimate sacrifices because they knew what tyranny was. You and I don't need to know what tyranny is, in large part because of the Second Amendment. And that's why I'm proud to stand with VCDL. I thank VCDL for the work that they're doing, and I thank each one of you for caring enough to be here today, to go around, talk to delegates, show them that you're real people, that you are not, just because you believe in the Second Amendment, some sort of a right-winger. Just go, be courteous, be friendly, and again, thank you for being here.
It's always good when we see a freshman come in here that's got a good understanding of our rights and is willing to fight to protect them. VCDL has been busy not only in the building behind you trying to protect our gun rights. We've been busy in the courts. A lot of our efforts have shifted to the courts in the meantime because it's hard to get good pro-rights things through the General Assembly as it's configured right now. We do have elections coming up in 2025. These are critical elections, and we hope gun owners get out and vote in November. But we have been going to the courts, and it had some success there. We've had a couple of victories with the city of Winchester. We've got another ongoing case there. So one of our attorneys, Gilbert Ambler, who's on the board of directors, and we're lucky, we have two gun rights attorneys on the board of directors. So I have access to attorneys anytime I need them, and it's wonderful. So Gilbert's going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the courts dealing with our right to keep and bear arms.
Thank you, Philip. And I know lots of folks said that it was really, really cold at home, and that's why they didn't come out. So I'm going to speak without my Carhartt on in case you're watching from home, so you understand it's not really that cold out here. And so you should come out and you should join us. What I want to talk about, first and foremost, I see a lot of people, as Philip talks about, talking about the legislature and relying on the legislature to do things. And that really is first and foremost what we should be looking for. Because although I spend lots of my time thinking about the courts and how the courts are going to handle things and view things, the courts are a slow process. They're not typically a fast process. And there's lots of judicial thought process that works against us in the courts. And this judicial thought process includes things like the concept of constitutional avoidance. What's the concept of constitutional avoidance? When you have a case that involves both constitutional and statutory issues, judges are going to defer as much as possible to deciding the case on the statutory issues before they reach the constitutional issues. And that means that it can be very, very slow to move the ball forwards and to get the courts to actually think about and address really important constitutional concepts. You see this on things like at the federal level, the pistol brace legislation, or the pistol brace rule that the ATF brought. And of course, the courts have struck that rule down, but they did not strike it down on Second Amendment grounds. Instead, they looked towards the Administrative Procedures Act, towards statutory grounds. And so that's a quick example, and yes, that's a federal example, but it's a quick example of how the courts will avoid answering important constitutional questions. And so that's one reason it's so important for the legislature to do their job and to respect the Constitution, because it is a long road and an uphill battle to get the courts to actually address the issues when they are violated. That being said, the court system is the check and balance for the legislature, and so we are in the courts on several very important issues. Philip referenced some wins in Winchester. We've had wins on the issues of parks in Winchester, the issue of permitted events in Winchester. We brought that lawsuit back in 2021. It didn't get resolved until 2022 or 2023. And now we're back in courts in Winchester because Winchester decided to ban guns inside parking garages, city-owned parking garages in the city of Winchester, claiming that the parking garages are sensitive areas. And while that case is an ongoing case, we have been fortunate in that we have secured an injunction against the prohibition, meaning Winchester has actually taken down the no gun signs on their parking garages, because when you think about the issue practically, it's tough to imagine a less sensitive area than a parking garage. Another case that we recently filed that I'm very excited about, we filed a case just after Christmas of 2024. So this case is only a couple of weeks old, challenging Virginia's gun ban in ABC stores and in state-owned rest stops. Many of you might not even be aware that there is a gun ban in state-owned rest stops. If you're driving on 81 or 95 and you need to pull over and use the bathroom, while you can have a firearm inside your vehicle, you cannot take that firearm into the rest stop building. And unfortunately, we know that these rest stops are often places where violence takes place. In fact, Virginia State Police has put out memos warning people at rest stops, keep your eyes open for child trafficking and human trafficking. So we know that there is criminal activity taking place in these rest stops. And yet you're not allowed to carry your firearm in there because the government does not trust you with a firearm inside the rest stops. And that's something that we need the courts to deal with. We need the courts to address that. What I think is very important is that VCDL has devoted resources. This is something that your membership and your efforts and your donations go into, is making sure that we have the resources to actually bring and litigate these cases, because together we can incrementally move the ball back. And I know that's not what most of you want to hear. Most of you want to hear we will have a sea of change that will get a huge constitutional decision. Very unlikely. Most judges are going to move the ball slowly. Even in the aftermath of Brune was a monumental decision, and look at how it's percolating through the lower courts. We're not seeing fundamental sea change in the lower courts. It's little piece by little piece. And what I'm telling you is you need to take those little pieces when you can take them. You need to be patient, and you need to continue on this path and make sure that we continue to challenge unconstitutional restrictions. Thank you.
I prefer to get things fixed in the building behind you. It's a lot easier than it is to go through the courts, a lot less expensive, and the courts, you don't always know how things are going to turn out. You know, speaking about gun bills, they've got two gun bills, gun control bills in the General Assembly right now, and if they both passed and you didn't have a permit, and you were in a car, there's one condition where you would not be able to comply with one or the other. You'd either be breaking one law or the other. There's no way to win it. We were talking about rest stops, and you can't carry there. Well, one bill says that if you don't have a permit, your gun in the car has to be visible at all times. Whether you're in the car or out of the car, the gun has to be visible. So you have to leave it on the seat or on the dashboard, sort of attracting criminals, I suppose. The other bill says if you leave a handgun that's visible, the police can tow your car and write you a ticket for $500. So, you're pulling up to a rest stop going, oh, geez, I need to go in the rest stop. So you're thinking, oh, yeah, I have to leave my gun in plain view. So you go in the restroom, state trooper goes by, he looks and sees your gun, so he tows your car and writes you a ticket for $500. If you don't put your gun in plain view, then you're in violation of the first law. So that shows you the insanity of gun control and so just a sampling of what we're seeing in the General Assembly. We got the usual, let's ban AR-15s, even though people are beat to death with hands and feet far more than they're killed with any kind of long gun. It's actually pretty rare to have somebody shot with a long gun. They're not easily concealable and so forth. But we got a bill to take care of that. We got a bill that says, if you got more than 10 rounds in a magazine. So where did they come up with this 10-round number? All I can figure is we got 10 fingers. I mean, it's a number that I think fell out of the thin air. There's no kind of a statistic or study. It's just a number they said, well, maybe we can get this passed. New York, they tried to make it 7, and they had so much pushback that they ended up saying, well, your magazine can hold 10, but you can only put 7 rounds in it. It's all arbitrary. It's all meant to discourage us from carrying. Next, I've got somebody that came all the way down from Idaho to be here. He comes every year. He was down in Tidewater. And was one of our gun show coordinators down in Tidewater, and he's still involved as a statewide gun show coordinator. Brendan Mooney.
See ya. Well, good morning to everyone here. I'm going to say, anyone who's saying it's cold, I'll trade them. I haven't seen anyone that's able to accept me. Last year it was 17 below back home. I think it's a brisk 7 or 8, so I think we're doing pretty good back there. But I want to say, hey, all the people that are here, I made it and you made it. What I don't see is all the other people, right? I was at some gun shops here because, of course, I mean, that's where I naturally derive myself to. And I asked some people, like, oh, you buying a new AR? Cool, you going to be here on Monday? Well, I got to do this or I got that. I want to applaud every single person here that actually took the time to actually come out and fight for their rights, okay? This is something that's monumental to actually get ahead, right? And there's a lot of people out there that just don't care. They're like, well, we got Youngkin in, so we're good. We got Trump now. No, we're done with that. Now, I want to encourage us. How many here have a friend that owns a gun? Let's raise our hand. We all have friends, okay? How many here go shoot with that friend, okay? Great. How many here can invite them to come out to an event? Yeah, I think we all can do that. I want you to look at yourself and say, you know what, I'm awesome, but let's get more people here, right? Who here was here for 2020? Okay, I love the energy back then. It was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. And I want people to sit there and go, we need to get involved in it and stop the apathy, right? So, if I can make it out from Idaho, North Idaho, right, and I'm involved there as well, then there's no excuse why you guys can't, have more people here. A couple other things, I look and it's like, hey, we got some great stuff going on in Virginia. We're fighting back. The lawsuits are excellent. The lawsuits are working, but we need to be able to get more citizen advocates, right? We need to really get those. Anyone who goes to church here needs to be talking to their congregation saying, hey, you need to get some training in here. We need to get a security team. We need to get people going, right? On Saturday, I was helping a fellow brother. He's at a synagogue, and they wanted me to do penetration testing, physical penetration testing, and take a look at some other security defenses. And I said, are you guys armed? They're like, yeah, we are. Oh, absolutely. And I sit there and I find a lot of places where we need to make sure that the houses of worship are covered on this, because it's a tough topic to bring, but we definitely need to make sure that everyone has a security team. We need to make sure people are actually getting involved with that. And also, we're going to have someone up here talking about medical training, okay? I'm going to tell you, one of the most important things that we can actually advocate for that's a bipartisan here for the state of Virginia is getting this faster training, okay? When I was in the military and I got the best training in my life was doing TCCC, where we had the first reaction where someone got shot, they could get to the hospital and actually survive. We need to have that for our teachers. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So when you're out there talking to your delegate, even if they're on the other side and avidly on the other side, talk to them and say, hey, look, I get we might disagree on the firearms portion, but you're okay with just getting some good kids protected against medical emergencies, against problematic items, okay? And sit down and talk to them and say, hey, If your son was in there, your daughter was in there, wouldn't you want someone trained? They don't need to have a gun today. We obviously want them to eventually have teachers that are armed. I think we can all be in concurrence with that. But we need to get them trained. The other thing is I am also getting involved out in Idaho. I made a pledge to come out here every single year. One of the things I am thinking and praying on is looking at possibly going out into the House of Representatives for the state of Idaho. We're kind of in the noodling phase of that. So it might be even more awesome to be able to say, hey, look, I'm out here, but then I got to fly back and help get more gun rights elsewhere. So I wanted to just say, look, it's an honor to see all you people. All of you guys are ardent patriots, and I cannot say I'm more proud of you guys because I know how much of a struggle it is to actually come out here in the supposed cold and actually get things done. So I just want to applaud you and thank you all from the bottom of my heart, and I look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Yes, the people that are here and the people that are in that building going in teams, you're carrying the weight of a lot of other gun owners on your shoulders and standing up for our rights, and that's absolutely critical. Pat Webb is our treasurer and secretary. She's going to talk to you a little bit about a few different items. She's just as active as you could imagine in the group. She's become a key cornerstone in all that she does for VCDL. So, and you can see how she had to get here. She was determined, foot surgery or not, she's going to be here today.
I want to thank you guys for coming out and representing all the people of Virginia, not just gun owners, because rights are for everybody. It is vitally important, and I say this every year, if we want a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people, that we participate in the process. So I thank you all for doing that today, and give yourself a big round of applause, please. And I have to say, if I can come out here on this knee scooter, which thank you, Bruce, for loaning me the knee scooter.
You're welcome.
And also attend all of the committee meetings like this and walk around with Philip all day in lobby, then I want to hear the excuses of all the people that didn't show up today, because there is no excuse for not defending the future of our country and leaving a legacy for our kids, our grandkids, and our great-grandkids. So it's vitally important to stay engaged in the process. How many of you have attended a committee meeting, whether it be virtual or in person? I see a few hands. How many of you have sent emails to your senators and delegates? I see a lot of hands. How many have made the phone calls to your senators and delegates? A few hands. How many of you have written letters like pen and ink and mailed them? So we asked a question a few years ago to an elected representative. I don't like to call them officials because they don't have official rule over me. And we asked them what carries the most weight. And they said, if they get 100, 200 emails on a topic, that gets their attention. If they get maybe 50 phone calls on a topic, that gets their attention even more. If they get 5 or less in-person visits on a topic, that really gets their attention, because you took the time out of your day to come to their office. Today, it is easier to have that in-person meeting because you can schedule a virtual meeting. So if you live in Pulaski, you can schedule a meeting with your senator and your delegate and get FaceTime where they recognize your face when they see it, if you do it often enough. So if you don't know your senator or delegate by name, and more importantly, if they don't know you by name, you're not doing something right. So how many people here are going to make it a point that their senator and their delegate recognizes their face and knows their name? Come on, people. I ought to see every hand up in the air here. All right. Well, thank you all again for coming out. I really appreciate it. And I hope you pay attention to what our guest speaker, Jim Irvine, says about the Faster Saves Lives program, and go online and take the survey about how safe our schools are. I have made it my personal mission to make our schools a safer place by giving our teachers the tools that they need to save lives in the event of a traumatic emergency. So thanks again for coming out, and have a great day, and I hope you are really effective in your lobbying efforts.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about kind of what's been going on in that building behind you. Senator Danny Diggs, basically a freshman senator, another one that has come out absolutely swinging. He was the sheriff of York County, and he ran for the Senate and won. And he's been standing solidly for your right to keep and bear arms. He put in a bill that said if you have a violent repeat, no, the word repeat is in there, offender. This is a guy that's been to prison already for robbing a bank or raping somebody or committing something, some violent felony with a firearm, and then here he is out again after spending time in prison, and he turns right around and robs, rapes, murders somebody again. So he put in a bill that says, okay, on a repeat offender, this guy had his chance. He knows that he did something wrong, got put in prison, but came right out and did it again. His bill said, let's give him 10 years mandatory. Let's get this predator that we know is a predator, because he's repeated himself, made it clear he did not learn his lesson the first time. Let's put him in prison for 10 years mandatory. Voted down. Okay? Voted down. So some people there don't mind violent predators on our streets. Well, of course, that becomes the excuse to take away our gun rights. Oh, we got to do something about crime. Forget that we're kind of stirring the bucket on crime by not locking these people away. Somebody that's a repeat violent offender is probably not somebody you're going to convince or turn around to be a decent law-abiding citizen. It's just not in their blood. So if they're a predator, they should not be walking amongst us any more than a lion or a tiger or a bear should be walking around amongst us either in an area. But that was voted down. One of the bills he also put in was rest areas. Getting rid of the gun ban in rest areas. We've been talking about that. You know, they put the ban in place in 2020, and in 2021, guess what happened? There was a shooting. 4 people got shot in a rest stop with the ban in place. So we know that stuff doesn't work. In fact, it makes it worse. I don't think we'd had a shooting before then in a rest stop. There were people that have been stabbed. There's all kinds of crimes, and state police follows this. But again, General Assembly, the Democrats in charge of these committees and on these committees, in fact, all the Democrats in the General Assembly seem to all be marching in step on any kind of gun control. It doesn't matter, if it's something that's clearly a problem that they could fix. Again, like rest areas, let people protect themselves. They've been doing that forever. They will not change that. There was a bill that put a limit on the time the state police could take to issue a permit for out-of-staters. There's no state in the union except Virginia that tells that bureaucratic, their state police or whoever's issuing these non-resident permits that they can take forever if they want. And some people were waiting 8 and 9 months and paying $100, and they were not getting. The state police just weren't able to get the job done, or didn't want it, or weren't in a hurry to get the job done. Let's say that. So Senator Diggs put in a bill that said let's limit it at 90 days. That's twice as long as it takes to do a resident permit. 90 days, and as long as the longest that the other states had was 90 days. General Assembly voted that down. They apparently liked the indefinite time to issue a permit. Senator Sturdivant put in a bill that would lower the concealed handgun permit age from 21 to 18. The courts have been ruling over and over now that 18-year-olds, they have full Second Amendment rights. And they do have the right in the United States to own a handgun, to own a rifle, to own a shotgun. But they voted it down. 17 other states already allow 18-year-old adults and up to get a permit. And 2 states allow 19-year-olds and up to get a permit. So young adults are people that have full constitutional rights all the way around when it comes to protecting themselves, freedom of speech, all of that stuff. So that was voted down. It is so frustrating that some of this stuff is so clearly important to protecting our rights, and yet it's just discarded based upon political lines. This stuff has almost all become partisan. Meanwhile, you've got bills that make it illegal for anyone under 21 to purchase any kind of quote-unquote assault rifle. Well, the semi-automatic rifles, like AR-15s, are absolutely protected by the Second Amendment, and this won't stand up in court. These 21-year-old restrictions on assault firearms and handguns are being knocked down in other states. So, but yet here we are putting them in. Got bills to make it so that you really can't make a gun on your own. People have been able to make homemade guns since the country was founded and before then. It's been, all this time we've been able to do it, but they've got bills in there now that make that virtually impossible. One of them, if you bought a block of aluminum, and the block of aluminum would have to be serialized if you were eventually going to turn it into a handgun or a rifle or a shotgun. It's just unworkable. But then again, if you're trying to disarm a population, making something unworkable or unreasonable makes a lot of sense for that goal. They're trying to expand the number of people that can that can cause you to lose your gun rights if you're involved in some kind of a battery of a person. It could be somebody that doesn't even live with you, and you lose your gun rights forever over a battery. So again, all this stuff is aimed at disarming us, and it's just an onslaught. And I hate to have to depend upon the governor to have to veto these things, but there's just never the gun control groups, the legislators, they're all voting lockstep. So it's almost impossible to stop these bad bills in the General Assembly. And we're counting upon the governor again. Last year, he vetoed 38 gun control bills, 38. And there were 40 that went in, 2 got modified. And thanks a lot to the governor. In fact, we gave him a challenge coin that was custom made for him to thank him and to commemorate the vetoing 38 gun control bills. And he said back then, he said, if you hand me the same bills again next year, which would be this year, I'm going to veto them again, which makes perfect sense. Nothing's changed. And so you would think in the General Assembly, they go, okay, let's just not bother. Oh, no. In fact, they got bills that are coming up, and the chairman will go to the patron of the bill and say, is this the same exact bill you put in last year? Yep. Isn't this the same exact bill that the governor vetoed last year? Yes. Okay, well, let's pass this thing on through again. It's like, what? So, it's insane. So we've been talking about this FASTER program, this idea of bringing quick medical responses in case of an emergency to schools. There was an audio tape that was played at some training I went to on this, and it was heartbreaking because it was actually a shooting outside of a school. It never went inside, and one kid was hit in the playground. He was hit in the leg, and it was not what normally wouldn't have been a fatal wound at all. It was just a bleeding incident. But the teachers had no idea what to do. They just didn't know. Nobody had ever trained them. None of them had ever been around a traumatic wound like that, and they didn't know what to do. So what did they do? They did what they'd been trained in, and the first thing they did was they hit the kid with an AED, a defibrillator. His heart wasn't the problem. He was bleeding out, but they didn't know what to do. And it was the 911 call was absolutely heartbreaking. And in the end, the kid died. And everybody in the room that was listening to this, that was taking the training, was screaming, "Get a tourniquet on him. Just get a tourniquet. You can stop the bleeding in the leg. Easy." Nope, nobody knew to do that. The dispatcher didn't know to tell them to do that. They just said, "Wait around, the ambulance is on the way," and the little boy didn't make it. And that's frustrating. That's very, very frustrating. So Jim Irvine came all the way down here from Ohio. He's with a group that's mirrored after VCDL. He was with a group up there like that. They've got a couple gun rights organizations, but he got into this issue because he's really focused on schools. So, Jim, this is Jim Irvine. And he'll talk to you about Faster Saves Lives and kind of what we're looking at doing now and what might be down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Hey, good afternoon. I came down from Ohio and Brandon from Idaho. So again, I echo the comments. If your friends aren't here, everybody in Virginia is closer than we are. Come down and get engaged. Phil and VCDL do a great job at what they do, and they're one of the best groups in the country. You guys, and thank you for being members and supporters, because you are the engine. He may be driving the bus, but you're the engine that powers it, the grassroots and the people that do that. And for those people who want to pass the horrible anti-gun terrible bills, I am also a member of the Second Amendment, a board member of the Second Amendment Foundation. It's good. We like suing it and having you guys pay us all the money for the lawsuits when it's all said and done, because unconstitutional is unconstitutional. So the reason I came up here is for the Faster Saves Lives program. It's a program we started in Ohio about 12 years ago. FASTER is an acronym. Stands for Faculty, Administrator, Safety Training, and Emergency Response. Schools have custody of our children, and we are sick of our children dying in our schools. The law enforcement, while they do everything they can, they're not there when it happens, and they don't have custody of those children. The medical responders have to wait for law enforcement to do their job and clear the building before they can ever enter and start. And even your SWAT medic, his job is to care for the SWAT team, not for those kids. And he's going to do his job because he's a professional. The school is the one with the legal and moral obligation to protect the kids. And they're trained in the AEDs. Most schools have somebody trained in the epinephrine for anaphylactic shock. But more people die from bleeding than those two things, especially when we look at kids. And so we need a way to stop the killer, and then we need a way to treat the injured. So we're working with VCDL to get funding and get the training in the schools. A trauma kit costs less than an AED, which is on every floor in that building across the street, multiple of them. So, and they're in your schools, and we need some people trained how to use them. If you have a heart attack or stroke, medical community talks about that golden hour. If we can get you to a class 1 trauma ward in that hour, you are almost assuredly going to live, if we can get you there alive. It's the same is true of gun. But on bleeding, depending on where the injury is, it might be just a few minutes. It could be under 2 minutes, and in extreme cases, under 1 minute, that we need to stop that bleeding. So it is critical that we get this training in there, and it's easy. The same 3-hour class you can run an AED, we can teach you how to save approximately 80% of survivable battlefield injuries. And I know active killings aren't super common. They're pretty rare events cosmically. But I also know more parents that I can count who've lost their kids in one of these events, and it destroys their lives, and it destroys your community when it happens there. And so, I'm an airline pilot. It's what I do for a living. almost never is a horrible standard in my industry. I have to deliver you safe every flight, and the schools should be delivering your children home safe every day. And I don't care what the threat is, that is their job. I love all the Guns Save Lives banners. That is really cool to see. Tourniquets also save lives. Compression bandages and chest seals. These are the things we need in our schools. For those of you who are trained more than a couple decades ago, we all learned that the tourniquets cause a loss of limb. It's a myth. It does not. You may lose a limb from the other traumatic thing, but the tourniquet stops the bleeding. This morning, there's well over 1,000, maybe 2,000 people with tourniquets on in operating tables across our country right now because it stops the blood. They do the vascular surgery, take them off, and there's little to no effects afterwards. So it's a life-saving tool. We need it in the schools. We need your support on this. And thanks for coming out, and thank you for supporting VCDL. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, one of the things I learned in taking that training was that, yeah, I mean, you can have a tourniquet on for 9 hours, maybe a day or more sometimes, and still the limb is still there. That what they warn you is don't have it on, then suddenly decide you want to take it off. Let the doctor take it off. Keep it on as long as it needs to be, and let the doctor take it off. Because if you take it off too soon, you blow out the clot that's in there, and there's only a limited amount of clotting factor in your bodies. And so then if it has to reform another clot, that can take longer and so forth. So the FASTER program also includes things like situational awareness, what to do if something's, if there's a violent event going on, what can you do if you're unarmed? And down the road, they also have a component that we're not dealing with now that deals with training teachers and staff with firearms to be able to stop something going on in the school because the police haven't arrived yet and the EMS doesn't get there until after the police have cleared the building. So this way, if the people that are in the best position to stop a bad guy are the ones in the building stuck with him. They've got nowhere else to go anyhow. And the training that they do for this is very high level. It's, you go through all kinds of like force-on-force scenarios where you're actually using airsoft guns. People, you're shooting at somebody and they're shooting back at you to really get the thinking going on tactics, how to clear rooms and all that. The training goes to actually going after the shooter. I mean, you got two levels. You've got teachers that can lock down a classroom. That's not that difficult. That's pretty straightforward. Don't need a lot of training for that because basically you hunker down in the room, get the students away from the door, and the teacher locks down on the door, and bad guy comes in the door, then he's toast because he's coming to what we call a kill zone. He doesn't know what he's walking into, but the teacher knows when he comes in. But to go out and chase down a shooter that's in the building somewhere, we call clearing a building, that's a very, very difficult and very tricky thing. But with the proper training and a team to do it, 2 or 3 administrators or a teacher and a couple other people, it can be done. You just have to know all that, and there's advanced training that basically the same kind of training police get to get that done. Now, the idea here in any of this is not to replace doctors with teachers that are putting on tourniquets. It's not to replace the police department, law enforcement, with armed teachers. It's merely something to save lives while you're waiting for those other things to show up. And there have been some other cases of people that have died that didn't need to die. There was a school shooting in Florida, and the person shot was on the 3rd floor. And again, the shot should have been survivable, but nobody had any training, nobody had any equipment. And by the time the police finally got in the building in Lakeland, Florida, then they cleared the ground floor, then they cleared the 1st floor, 2nd floor, 3rd floor. And by the time they cleared that, then the medical teams come in and they went all the way up to the top eventually. By the time they got to the 3rd floor where this young lady had been shot, she was already dead. Didn't have to die. If a teacher or somebody up there had the equipment and so forth, then it could have been prevented. And the suggestion on the equipment is to have plenty of that. Everywhere you've got a fire extinguisher in a school, you should have a trauma kit. Therefore, in an emergency, you can somebody that's trained with it can quickly get their hands on that kit, and not have to go chasing all over the building trying to find one. Because, like Jim was saying, you might only have a minute or two to save that life. So you got to work quickly, and so that's something that we're looking at getting the medical part now, and maybe somewhere down the road when the timing is right, looking at expanding it to cover training teachers. And this would be voluntary. Nobody would take any of this training, medical or firearms training down the road, if they didn't want to do it. This would be completely voluntary. Now, you know, if you speak up, and enough people speak up, things can change. Right now, the Democrats are cramming gun control through like mad. However, last year and this year, there's an interesting case. Last year, they had a bill that said you can't carry a gun in a restaurant concealed if they serve alcohol. And that bill was voted through, you know, all the Democrats supported it, all the Republicans voted against it. But that bill mysteriously ended up going to a committee that was never going to meet again at the last minute. It never made it to the governor's desk, never made it out of the General Assembly, but it was never voted down. It was simply sent to a committee that was never going to meet. Well, if you're familiar with that building, if you've done any of this legislative stuff, you've seen that trick before. So why? Why did that bill, of all the 40 bills made it to the governor, how did that one just kind of slide away to a committee that was never going to meet again? What happened there was enough Democrats and constituents of the Democrats in the General Assembly said, no, you're not going to tell me I can't take a gun when I take my wife to a restaurant. I'm not going to be leaving it out in the car, and I don't want to open carry. They got enough pushback that they slid the bill away, and it never made it. Well, something similar just happened with one of their really bad bills here. Again, I think they got some bad pushback on it. This bill that just got basically passed by indefinitely this year would have required a permit to buy a firearm. You would have to get fingerprinted. You would have to get training. You'd have to answer questions similar to what you'd answer when you actually bought a firearm. All of this to get a permit good for 5 years. When it expired, you'd have to get training again. I'm not sure if you had to do the fingerprinting again, you might have. But it was a really tyrannical bill. Not that most of these aren't, but that one was really bad. That one disappeared. And I will contend that they got enough pushback on that saying, no, I'm not going to get a permit every time I want to be able to buy any kind of firearm. So we can stop this stuff, but it really takes everybody getting together. Another example of this was some years ago, the Attorney General at the time, Herring, decided he was going to drop reciprocity with a whole bunch of states so that we would no longer be able to carry when we travel. That created such an uproar, a huge uproar, that the gun controllers in the General Assembly didn't know what to do. So in the end, they ended up passing a bill that VCDL helped push through that said we're going to honor all permits from all states. Before then, we only honored certain states. Now we went the opposite direction. And it was Terry McAuliffe that signed that bill into law, which effectively was like a bus rolling over the Attorney General back then 2 or 3 times because that was the opposite of what he was trying to do. But enough voices were raised loudly enough that it actually turned the ship 180 degrees around and actually made things better than they had been. Now we can carry in like 38 states. But there's a bill in here that's still alive that would put us back in the bad old days where we didn't honor that many permits from other states. It put in a bunch of arbitrary stuff where if the laws have to be similar. Well, who gets to determine if the laws are actually similar to where 2 people wouldn't disagree on it? So we've got to work to kill that bill. Oh, and one more thing I forgot about on that or the firearm purchase permit that I was talking about that got sent away. Oh, it also had like a part of that basically said that if they felt a person was lacking essential character and temperament necessary to be entrusted with a firearm, they wouldn't get a permit. So whoever's issuing the permit, if they felt like you didn't have the right temperament, in their opinion, you wouldn't get a permit to purchase a firearm. So how's that for arbitrary? Who gets to decide who has the essential character and temperament necessary to possess a firearm? Who gets to do that? That's the kind of tyranny that you see in some of these really bad states and in some other countries. So we know that bill's gone for now. But I'm telling you, don't be surprised if you see this stuff coming back. That's why we've got to be here on a regular basis to stop this. And I mean, in about what time is it? So in a little over an hour, we'll have a new president, and he's, his view on I think we all have a lot of hope that a lot of this stuff's going to turn around. But his view is fight, 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 never surrender, never stop. And that's where we are. No matter how irritating this stuff is, no matter what bad hand you're dealt, you play it and you don't give up and you keep fighting for this stuff, because we're fighting for the future of our children, our grandchildren, and we're fighting something that other people have died to give us what we have now. We cannot let it slip away. We certainly can't let it slip away by apathy. But I have a feeling that if we can keep going on this, we're going to see brighter days. But we just have to keep going. So we're starting to hold more meetings around the state. We'll be doing that as well. I think that's important, trying to keep people involved in different parts of the state. I know when we, in the early days, we didn't have much attachment out to the far western part of the state. And we had Al Steed Jr. became a member, and out there he just turned the western, Roanoke and all that area out that way, really got them into the fold of protecting gun rights. I think sometimes the more rural areas take our gun rights for granted because they're thinking, well, I know the sheriff, or I don't think they'll ever affect me out there. But the truth is, it can affect you everywhere, and getting people woke up to that and getting them activated is something that Al did. And this year's legislative, the gun bill analysis document that I put together, Al died last year, so it's dedicated to Al Steed Jr. I wish I could make a rule that says if you're a member of VCDL, you can't die, because we lost about 3 or 4 people last year, and it really hurts. But on the other hand, we're reaching out to young people, trying to get them in as well, because this is ultimately, they're going to inherit whatever we leave them, and they're going to have to protect it for their children. We just have to keep going. The other side will not stop. I don't know that I can give you an explanation for it, other than some, of course, want civilian disarmament. Some people believe that they can actually stop crime by banning guns, and of course you can't do that, but they believe that, and some of them have had bad trauma, but it's never going to stop, and neither can we. I wish we could. VCDL shouldn't need to exist, but we And let's see, Bruce? Okay, and Bruce Jackson, who is on the board of directors. How long have you been on the board now?
Almost 18 years.
Yeah, 18 years. He wanted to address the crowd a little bit.
Good morning, guys. Thank you for coming. I talked to a lot of people, and they asked very similar questions. And one of the questions I get asked almost every time I go someplace is, so do you think we're going to lose our gun rights? And I say, oh, yeah. And they look at me like I've got 2 heads. Well, the problem is the hunters don't support the black rifle crowd. The black rifle crowd doesn't support the collectors. The collectors don't support the concealed carry. And they've got us so divided. If it says guns, you should show up. Then one of the things I see is when times are bad, gun owners get to work. It's like rowing a canoe upstream in a swollen river. And they will dig in until they're beyond tired, and they will push, and they will hold their ground. And then finally, the political climate changes, and they get out of that stream, and they get to a holding pond, and then they stop paddling and they just sit there. Once you get to that pond is when you really, really need to push. That's when you really need to paddle, because every stroke moves you so much farther, whereas before you were just holding what you had. We need to push more. When you're tired, push more. I've been on the board 18 years. I've told the board that I will be retiring after this term, so I've got next, not this coming June, but the one after, I will be retiring off the board, and I'm looking for fresh blood. I told the board that it's time. I still will be helping the organization. I will still be active on the board, but a non-voting member. Not because I don't want to get involved, but I believe it's the best thing for the organization. I'm not who I was 20 years ago. I don't think very many of us are. So not only do you need to stay involved, but you need to coach. You need to bring somebody alongside. Your kids, your neighbors, your friends, educate them. I was talking to several people and they said, well, we're going to go to the Capitol and see Trump. You know, I said, okay, go watch a show. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, think about it. New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Illinois, California, Montana, Virginia, they all have the same federal gun laws. Some are freer than others. Well, that's all state-based, and that's why you need to be active state-based. So you can go become a part of history while your rights ebb away from you without you noticing. Frog in the boiling water.